In November of 2024, more than a decade after Faith Hedgepeth's murder, prosecutors dropped a new bombshell. They added first-degree burglary and sexual offense charges to the indictment against Miguel Enrique Salgado Olivares, the man already accused of taking her life. Why now? And why did it take this long? The case had seemed cold for years, but then came a breakthrough. A DNA match and a palm print left on an empty rum bottle, both pointing directly to Miguel. The evidence was chilling. Still, many can't help but ask, how was he walking free all of that time? Faith was just 19, a proud member of the Hollywossaponi tribe and a driven scholarship student at UNC Chapel Hill. She had plans, a bright future, and a family that believed in her. But one ordinary September night in 2012, something went horribly wrong, and the ripple effects are still felt today. Even with charges finally filed and a suspect in custody, this story is far from resolved. Was critical evidence overlooked in those first crucial hours? Could this case have been resolved sooner? To get the full picture, we need to go back to where it all began, to the night Faith's routine college evening turned into a horrifying mystery. Join me for another strange, odd, and mysterious story here at Odd Mystery Stories. Faith's final hours started like any ordinary college night, routine, uneventful, and filled with plans for the future. But what seemed like a typical evening would soon become the framework of a mystery that still haunts Chapel Hill. On the evening of September 6, 2012, Faith and her roommate, Karina Rosario, attended a sorority interest event for Alpha Pi Omega, a group Faith hoped to join. Leaving at around 7:15, Faith turned her attention to a paper she was writing about her Native American tribe's history. By 8 p.m., the two were studying together at Davis Library. Faith briefly left and returned to the library to keep working. At around 11:30 p.m., the two headed back to their shared apartment at Hawthorne at the View. But the night wasn't over yet. They decided to go out. After changing their clothes, they made their way to the Thrill nightclub in downtown Chapel Hill. Surveillance footage shows them entering at 12:40 a.m. on September 7th. For about an hour and a half they danced, socialized, and blended into the late-night crowd. Then, just after 2 a.m., Karina began feeling unwell. Cameras captured them leaving the club at 2:06 a.m. They returned to their apartment at around 3 a.m. That's when the timeline gets murky. A downstairs neighbor reported hearing 3 loud thumping noises shortly after the woman got home, a detail that would later raise suspicions. At 3:40 a.m., a series of text messages were sent from Faith's phone to Brandon Edwards, Karina's ex-boyfriend. The tone was strange, and investigators questioned whether Faith actually wrote them. One text was quickly followed by a single-word correction. Meanwhile, Karina was also trying to reach Edwards. He didn't answer. At 4:25 a.m., Karina left the apartment, reportedly thinking Faith was asleep in her room. She didn't lock the door. It wasn't until around 11 a.m. that Karina returned, this time with a friend, Marisol Rangel. What they found when they opened Faith's bedroom door changed everything. Faith was dead. The silence in that apartment for nearly 7 hours is one of the most unsettling gaps in this case. What happened between 3 a.m. and 11 a.m.? Did someone enter while Karina was gone, or were they there already? Those unanswered questions set the stage for a crime scene that would shake investigators and leave a community demanding answers. When investigators entered Faith Hedgepeth's bedroom, they found a scene that would haunt them for years. Her body was on the floor, partially undressed, and covered with a blanket, as if someone had tried to hide the violence that had just taken place. The brutality was undeniable. Faith had suffered severe head trauma, and a broken Bacardi bottle was found near her, believed to be the murder weapon. Blood was spattered on the walls, the floor, and furniture, pointing to a violent and chaotic struggle. There were no signs of forced entry. That detail immediately raised a troubling possibility. Had Faith known her killer? Or had she simply left the door unlocked, thinking she was safe? In the room, investigators also discovered a used tampon and semen, clear indications of a possible sexual assault. Yet oddly, the autopsy didn't show major external injuries consistent with, adding another layer of complexity to the case. The combination of sexual evidence and blunt force trauma suggested a deeply personal and possibly rage-driven attack. Then came the most chilling detail. Near Faith's body, on a torn Time-Out chicken takeout bag, was a handwritten message scrawled in ballpoint pen. "I'm not stupid, bitch, jealous." The meaning was cryptic, but the anger was unmistakable. Experts quickly noted that the handwriting appeared disguised. Forensic analyst Peggy Walla observed that the strokes were erratic and aggressive, likely written by someone enraged, possibly after being insulted or rejected. The use of the words stupid and jealous hinted at emotional motive, possibly romantic, possibly revenge. Strangely, the note was clean. No blood, no smears, even though nearly everything else in the room was stained. That raised more questions. Was it written before the attack, in another room, or even brought in after the fact? Either way, its placement near Faith's body felt intentional. Was the killer trying to send a message, taunt police, or frame someone else? The scene was a swirl of contradictions, a mix of violence, personal rage, and calculated messaging. It was as if the killer wanted investigators to find just enough clues, but not enough to solve it. But the physical evidence wasn't the only thing that raised alarms. That same night, Faith's phone may have captured something else, something that continues to puzzle both investigators and the public to this day. One of the strangest and most debated pieces of evidence in Faith's case is the 3-minute voicemail, the result of what appears to be an accidental pocket dial from her phone. Time-stamped at 1:23 a.m., the recording captured muffled, overlapped voices. Some sounded frantic, some sounded angry, and none of it was easy to interpret. At first glance, the timing seemed clear. Faith and her roommate Karina were at the Thrill nightclub at around that hour. But what struck experts immediately was what the voicemail didn't contain. No loud music, no bar chatter, no background noise you'd expect in a club at peak hours. Instead, the tape featured hushed, tense voices. Forensic audio analyst Arlo West reviewed the recording and argued that it may have captured something far more serious, possibly even a confrontation or physical struggle. He claimed to hear what sounded like distress, panic, and possibly even names. Names some believe connected to people within Faith's circle. But the audio quality was poor. Words overlapped, background sounds blend into one another. What one person thought was a cry for help, another thought was just a garbled echo. Some listeners swore they could hear the names Eric and Rosie, which quickly fueled rumors, especially given existing tensions in Faith's social circle. Still, nothing in the voicemail could be verified with certainty. Law enforcement analyzed the recording and reviewed its metadata. They ultimately dismissed it as irrelevant to the murder, citing the lack of any conclusive sounds that linked it to the crime. In their view, it was likely just background noise from a busy night out, unsettling but not significant. Not everyone agreed. To this day, the voicemail remains one of the case's most talked about elements. Was it a real-time recording of something sinister? A missed window into the final moments of Faith's life? Or just an eerie coincidence? For those who believe the truth was buried in that distorted audio, the voicemail represents a missed opportunity, a clue that might have changed everything, if only it had been clearer. And just as the mystery deepened, attention turned to someone investigators couldn't ignore, someone who seemed tied to Faith in ways too close for comfort. In the early days of the investigation, one name quickly rose to the top of the suspect list: Eric Decoy Jones. The suspicion wasn't without reason. Jones had a documented history of domestic violence against Faith's roommate, Karina Rosario. He once punched holes in their apartment walls, and Faith had reportedly helped Karina get a protective order against him. That alone was enough to raise red flags, but it didn't stop there. The night before Faith's murder, Jones sent a cryptic text to a friend asking for forgiveness for what I am about to do. He also posted a vague but disturbing message on Twitter that same night. Just days later, he updated his Facebook banner to a quote about being protected from, quote, girls who don't deserve me and the ones who wish me dead today. With that kind of behavior and his proximity to both Karina and Faith, police zeroed in. Investigators spent critical early days, even weeks, focusing on Jones, conducting interviews, gathering background, and building a potential motive. But while they were doing that, the forensic evidence was telling a different story. Eventually, Jones was compelled by the court to submit a DNA sample, and the results were definitive. The semen collected from Faith's body produced a full DNA profile, and it didn't match Jones. He was ruled out. Despite that, some believe the intense focus on Jones may have cost investigators valuable time. Leads that could have steered the case in other directions were delayed or missed altogether. DNA was also collected from other men linked to Faith or Karina, including Brandon Edwards and Jordan McCreary, but none of them were matches either. Meanwhile, critical investigative steps were overlooked. Neighbors reported that police didn't request surveillance footage from the parking lot across from the Thrill nightclub until 19 months after the murder. By then, the footage was gone. The wooded area behind Faith's apartment, they never thoroughly searched. Witnesses canvassing in the hours after her death? Incomplete. For many, this early tunnel vision became a defining flaw in the investigation, one that allowed the real killer to slip through the cracks. For years, the case sat cold. No suspects, no arrest, just mounting frustration from a community still waiting for answers. But behind the scenes, technology was evolving. DNA analysis was becoming sharper, and eventually, it gave investigators a new path forward, one that would finally lead them to a name. By 2016, Faith's case had gone cold again. No arrests, no suspects, just more questions and a community still searching for answers. That's when investigators turned to a new tool. Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based genetics company specializing in DNA phenotyping, using the genetic material collected from Faith's crime scene. Parabon created a composite image of what the suspect might look like, not based on eyewitnesses but on DNA. The image, shared on ABC's 2020, depicted a man of mixed ancestry, likely Native American and European or Latino with olive skin, black hair, and minimal freckles. It couldn't predict his height or weight, but for the first time police had something resembling a face. The release sparked brief hope. Vigils were held, tips poured in, and awareness surged on campus and in the community. But the sketch, while groundbreaking, didn't lead to an arrest. That would take another 5 years. In August of 2021, nearly a decade after Faith's murder, a random DUI arrest in Wake County, North Carolina changed everything. Miguel Enrique Salgaro Oliveras, 28, was taken into custody for driving under the influence. As part of routine booking, his DNA was collected and entered into the national database. The match came back quickly, and it was conclusive. His DNA was the same profile investigators had been holding on to since 2012. It was the break they'd been waiting for, and it came from someone who had never even been on their radar. Miguel wasn't among the more than 2,000 people interviewed or the 750 individuals whose DNA had been tested. He had no known connection to Faith, her roommate Karina, or anyone else tied to the case. But the evidence didn't stop at DNA. Court records revealed that a palm print found on the broken Bacardi bottle, believed to be the murder weapon, also matched Miguel. 2 pieces of forensic evidence, both placing him inside Faith's apartment on the night she died. For Faith's family, the arrest brought a wave of emotions, part relief, part renewed grief. Her father, Roland Hedgepeth, shared that justice for him wasn't just about charges, it was about truth. It was about remembering Faith. But the arrest also raised hard questions. Why wasn't Miguel found sooner? Could this breakthrough have happened years earlier if investigative focus hadn't been so narrow? The use of phenotyping had created momentum, but in the end, it was a routine traffic stop that revealed Faith's alleged killer. After nearly a decade, investigators finally had a name, but the time lost still hangs heavy over the case and over those who loved her most. Now, with the trial on the horizon, closure still feels distant for those closest to Faith. 2 haunting questions continue to echo. What did that note truly mean? And what really happened during those early morning hours, the window between Corina Rosario leaving the apartment and returning to find Faith's body? Despite the DNA match, the palm print, and an arrest nearly a decade later, these unanswered pieces keep the case alive in the public's imagination. The gaps in the timeline, the eerie voicemail, and that cryptic message left behind all continue to fuel speculation. And with time comes erosion. Witness memories fade, emotions harden, and the evidence that might have once told the full story may never speak clearly again. Faith's family has waited for justice, but justice isn't always about one arrest or one courtroom. It's about understanding why, about piecing together the how, and about honoring the person at the center of it all. A daughter, a student, a bright light extinguished far too soon. Will we ever know the full truth? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your theories in the comments. If you found this case compelling, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries that still demand answers. Hey, thanks so much for watching this story. If you're into true crime and odd mysteries like this one, I'd love for you to check out my new e-reading list over at bookshop.com. It's filled with gripping thrillers and mystery books I think you'll love. And if you'd like to support the channel and help keep these stories coming, you can join me on Patreon. Even buying me a virtual cup of coffee makes a huge difference. I truly appreciate your support. You'll find both links right below in the comments section. See you in the next one. Thank you.